And I guess kind of turn it over to Ken and let him give his information here. I made you host, Ken.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Jim. So good evening, everyone. As you saw in some of the correspondence that I sent you earlier today, what I shared with you was the summary slides of the presentation along with the discussions that we had. I think we had about 13, 14 attendees. And I think that there was either affirmation or confirmation of some of these particular conversations that we've been having regarding the housing production plan, affordability, et cetera. So typically what happens is that presentation, as you see, will be included, but that'll be actually in the appendix. The draft that you have that Lori had shared as she's been working on the draft is chapters 1 through 3 of what a housing production plan typically is composed of. A lot of the conversations that were happening at the community meeting as well as the survey will fold into the action plan, the chapter 4, which is here's what Hadley has identified as policies and or recommendations for achieving the maintenance of a 10% subsidized housing inventory, as well as any other goals that are going to be set for this particular plan. What I also shared with you, and what probably the gist of this particular meeting is to review some of those previously adopted or previously understood recommendations from the master plan in 2017, as that was the last time it was updated, and the 2019 affordable housing analysis. That was a DLTA project a couple of years ago. And those are going to be the starting point for where the town may want to be looking for housing policy and how to continue pursuing that. But I guess for anyone, if there's any sort of comments or questions about the particular presentation or what has been shared with you thus far, the maps, the draft, the presentation, the previous housing recommendations, I guess we'll start there, and then maybe that'll filter into, continuing the conversation regarding the recommendations. Anyone? How did you feel about the meeting? I guess that's a good question too.
I thought it went pretty well. I was pleased that as many people attended it as we had, and I thought there was some good comments made by people.
Right.
There was a variety of comments, which was good.
Yeah, and I think that's the important part is that variety. I think that there definitely is both an affirmation from what I've been hearing in town, working with the planning board in my various capacities with the board and with the town, but also hearing about issues that maybe I haven't heard in the past, but maybe for you all, it may be new, or it may just be rearing its head again. But certain things that I think that were helpful to understand more based on that conversation. I think what's telling though is that, and this was alluded to, was that you have a strong corridor which could be primed for some denser development. That's something that is not new. You've established certain parts of the town that could probably be more appropriate for increased development. This idea of shared septics, that's something that may or may not be something that the town either creates a policy around or may be amenable to, especially in some of the more less dense areas of town. But also, I think what was helpful was the affirmation that the conversations regarding housing and affordability is not new. it's definitely a reminder of those conversations still happening. It's definitely reflected in your affordable housing analysis and your master plan. So it seems like you're on the right track. The fact is you're at 12.5% a subsidized housing inventory, so there's no threat necessarily of the affordable housing of a 40B. However, I think the fact that you are proactively looking at this as an opportunity to sustain that number, and then also on the side, look at policies that may help you even increase that number. So that's just, some of my observations regarding that evening.
Kevin, one
yeah.
thing I just wanted to bring up, just to make sure that you're, I guess, well aware of it. You may be aware of it, but because you mentioned that shared septic, I certainly didn't want to say anything at that forum that we had, but just a reminder that we had been starting discussions with Amherst about the possibility of sewer being sent in their direction. That would alleviate obstacles, if I can say that, for further development along Route 9. With a major concern in the past has always been overtaxing our own sewer system. So the conversation was started, but then it kind of stalled. And I did see Paul Bockelman at an MMA event a week or 2 weeks ago, I think, at this point, and asked him if we could kickstart that again. And he's very amenable to that. So I've asked the town administrator to reach out and schedule another meeting so we can get that back on track. No presumption of where it's going to go, but just make sure you're aware of that.
No, I think that's great. I think whether or not that remains as something that can be, what's the word? That can be documented, like an action like that, having or initiating a conversation with the town of Amherst to expand sewer in the direction of Hadley so that Hadley can tap into that, I think is something that can show, especially if you're going to use this particular plan along with any other community plans that you do to the state. If there are some infrastructure funds that are available, that this type of conversation has happened in the past. It's not something that's coming out of thin air. You've documented, initial meetings with the town or revived meetings with the town with regards to sewer expansion into Hadley, so that Hadley can use that. But that's great. That's some great insight.
And to your point about, the MMA meeting was specifically about, an update on recent legislative acts, and also very specific to funding opportunities out there. And, the bottom line is Boston likes some level of collaboration, and Hadley on our own, because we're a wealthy community on paper. We have a problem applying for grant money because, they say, well, you need to be paying your fair share. You've got an extremely low tax rate, and the ability to pay if you just look at us on paper. So I think being able to show that we're doing something collaboratively and regionally may help in that regards to getting that paid for in fuller part.
That's great. Thank you. Great. So
Can I have a question?
sure.
At some point, I remember seeing that some of our subsidized housing is going to drop out of that list in the fairly near future, and I haven't. So our 12% would dip. Where does that fit into the discussion here? Is that going to be?
That raises a whole new set of discussion. We actually talked about that recently with the planning board, and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we've got roughly a little over $600,000 in it. And as far as buying affordable housing, that's gonna buy maybe one dwelling. It's not gonna go very far. And what we have come to realize that money may go a lot further by encouraging the existing housing, because there's one, the one by Stop and Shop comes off in March of 2023. Is scheduled, could come off, not that it's scheduled to, it could come off. And the Winfield, whatever the new name is, would come off in approximately 10 years,
Oh, 10 years. Oh,
That's stuff.
about 10 years. And that would bring us below 10%. If the new affordable housing, the 40 friendly 40B that's going to come in possibly across from Stables would be, all things combined, that would bring us very, very close to the 10% line. But we've also come to realize if we can use the Affordable Housing Trust to discourage those two facilities from coming off of the rolls, that may go a lot further than anything else.
yeah,
And so we are pursuing that avenue. Where we end up. The other thing is as far as coming off of the rolls entirely and having no affordable housing in either of those, that's against zoning bylaw. So if the one by Stop and Shop simply says, we're not going to have any more affordable housing, okay, you're not in compliance with zoning. You are now an illegal complex. And the same thing with Winfield. So we have a small stick over them. And maybe with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the zoning bylaws, we can encourage some of both to continue. In other words, they can have, as long as they have 25% market rate, their entire housing complex counts as affordable. So maybe we may be able to swing some deals here. Okay, you don't need to have 100% affordable, but you need to have 25% and 75% market rate. With that, with some money from the affordable housing, we may end up being in good shape. But that is just 100% pure speculation right now.
Yeah, I think as Jim had suggested, those are definitely tools and recommendations to explore further, because presumably you can use those funds for that. So ensuring that the planning board is, having, because they're serving as a trust fund, that those conversations are happening, you can possibly stop those from either leaving the role or not having all of, a good chunk that would bring you under 10% to do that. So Jim has definitely identified a role for the trust fund to help preserve those. Mark, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how many units are there in the place next to Stop and Shop, and what are they all currently affordable housing? Do they all count for affordable housing? So if we were to lose whatever percent, how many would we lose?
The one next to Stop and Shop, I believe, I'm not positive of this, but it is 100% affordable housing right now. And I believe there's 27 or 28 units in total over there.
So Jim, I'm going to share my screen because you're there. I found this subsidized housing inventory from.
Okay, oh, you got the inventory?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there it is. Yeah.
So yeah, 25 will come off the roll late April 2023, and then the Winfield's 80 units coming off 2032.
So 23, if 25 were to come off, but then a quarter were to go back on, is that what you were saying, 25% for them to remain in compliance?
There's 20, put there 25 units, Ken, I can't read it, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so if we could convince them to retain 6 units of affordable and 19 market rate, the entire complex would therefore count as affordable. All 25 would still stay as considered affordable. It's just a crazy formula the state uses.
Oh, you get to keep all 25, but we only actually have to have 6. Oh,
It's a crazy formula the state has been using for years. I can't explain it, but that's the way it is. I'm not even going to try to explain it. And the same thing at Winfield. They have 80 units. So if we can convince them to at least retain 25% and the rest of market rate, all 80 would still count.
I see.
Okay, so we have some negotiating there possibly,
Good to know.
yeah.
Thanks. That's great info.
Yeah, so what what our next steps are, and I will ask that you continue to look at the chapters 1 through 3 as Lori has drafted them. Provide your comments. This is your baseline information. This is an examination of the development constraints, some of the geographic constraints from that is required per the DHCD plan. The good chunk of the work is really talking about how you're planning to maintain and or build upon the affordable housing inventory that you currently have. And I'm going to share my screen again, which brings us to the conversation about goals or recommendations and goals. Oops. So, so you have the master plan, which identified some goals with relation to housing, and in that element discussing expanding the types of housing permitted in Hadley, consider adjusting zoning to encourage new housing typologies in locations where increased density serves other planning goals. Consider amending the zoning bylaw to make clustered residential zoning by right use and require a special permit for standard subdivisions. Discuss maintaining 10% of housing stock as affordable housing. You're already at 12.5. And the creation of affordable housing trust fund, which you've done. So the fact that you have already created an affordable housing trust fund and are moving towards trying to establish that as getting the wherewithal, getting your understanding of the funding that's in there, getting also the ways and the understanding of how funds are being appropriated to that trust fund, either through your payment in lieu of for your affordable units or other means, CPA. Those are the various types of funding sources that could help build that trust fund, which could possibly, as Jim suggested, help the town with those units that may be coming off in the near future. In the 2019 analysis, there were some low-hanging fruit that were established as far as additional housing, additional actions. And you can see March 2020, that was the start of COVID. So a lot of this, probably conversations have been happening, but probably not at the level that should be. Establishing a Hadley Housing Committee, understanding what that committee may look like, developing support for the trust fund, meeting with the Amherst Housing Authority to discuss the status of Hadley's subsidized housing developments and discuss roles of all parties. I believe that was related to possibly management. Meet with Valley CDC, they're a developer, and have developed affordable housing throughout the Valley. And the appropriate parties at Amherst, UMass, to discuss some of the issues that have been identified in your community meeting, like the student, the housing of students in some of your single family homes, taking away the inventory for those that, those younger families, let's say. Yeah, so I'm not going to necessarily read all of these, but this is, taking a look at this, it's more than likely that a lot of these recommendations are going to exist in your housing plan just because these are typically the things that you'd find. So if there are low-hanging fruit, if there are ideas of ensuring an education for these types of programs. Those are definitely can be included in recommendations, but at the same time, it's usually regulatory. What is the planning board's role in identifying zoning tools for affordable housing? Maybe taking a look at some boundaries of the zoning districts, ensuring that the master plan gets implemented. That's their role too. And then taking a look at current zoning tools to at least provide comment and consideration for the planning board to look at if they want to take a look at things like accessory apartments by right, and then the rezoning for multifamily types along Route 9.
Ken, just a quick question.
Sure.
Yeah, so for some of these, so for example, like we have the Housing and Economic Development Committee meeting, or group, which is, you know, a subset of us is participating in this. So, you know, we haven't been meeting regularly while this is underway, with the thought that we'd be picking kind of back up again as we knew where this was going. But, and then we have ongoing dialogue with the university, and housing is a topic of conversation, especially because of the whole situation with the Econo Lodge, you know, what they're using for
Yes.
transfer students right now.
Yeah.
So would it be helpful to you to get kind of an update for things that are, you know, even at least partially underway?
I think that's very helpful because the thing is, you'd be documenting if the Housing and Economic Development Committee is your tool to address housing issues, but also economic development issues. And obviously those things are interchangeable. You can't talk about either or without the other. Definitely if there are developments with regard to that committee and the conversations that you may be having, that can be important for this plan. So I would welcome that, so that we can include, you know, at least the conversations that may be ongoing. And if the recommendation is to just say, continue talking to, then that should be something that is identified.
Okay.
But yeah, so we use this as a starting point. And I invite the committee over the next couple of weeks, because we probably will be completing the plan fairly shortly. As I mentioned, it is very prescriptive. A lot of the items are specific to things that are already exist for the town. You have your constraints. We have your town facilities, are your town properties, and those parcel IDs. That's a requirement for a certified housing production plan. You're already over 10%. Your plan will be certified based on the presumption that it will get approved by the planning board and the housing and the select board by when those hoping that it doesn't come off the roll, but when those 23 units come off the roll, you know, you'll be obviously closer to 10%. But you'll be over 12.5, or you'll be over 10% when this eventually gets certified by the state. So the goal is to, over the next couple of weeks, take and assemble this particular plan, take the recommendations from the housing chapter of the master plan, and probably maybe looking at the land use chapter and looking at those recommendations and seeing how they fit, doing some, providing some content and possibility of recommendations for zoning and regulatory tools, knowing what the planning board has done over time and what the town has approved over time, over the past couple of years. And then what will be helpful is for the committee just to continue providing those comments. And this is probably our next meeting is pulling up the draft. And it may be a short meeting if you send us your comments prior to that meeting, but pulling up the draft and literally going, does anyone have comments? Please comment, and then we'll go to that part of the draft, we'll change, and then go from there. But at this point, we've done the necessary requirements for the purposes of a housing production plan. And we're just gonna take the community plans that have developed some housing recommendations, see where we are with them. If they need to be refined, do that. Maybe assemble them into a way that is helpful for the town with regards to regulatory policy, with regards to outreach and communication. If there's a role for the Housing and Economic Development Committee, how that plays into their role in implementing some of the strategies within this plan. And if there's any other type of policy or regulatory tool that we can explore or at least provide comments for. But that really is, those are the next steps of this particular plan. It's a minimal engagement with regards to, we got 276 responses, which is awesome. And sharing that within the context of this particular plan, I think that's something to celebrate. But the plan itself is, here is what Hadley currently has. This is the inventory. This is the demographics. This is some of the basic forecasting that the plan asks us to follow. The second chapter, here are the constraints. Here are the geographic areas of town where the master plan may have identified some additional growth. Here are places of the town where there are strategic open space parcels that the town does not want any development on. Laying that story out, and then taking into account the plan that we'll be creating to address the maintenance of the affordable housing inventory.
When should we have our next meeting, Ken?
I would say it probably would be okay to do it. I'm trying to let me look at my calendar. And we'll give you this in advance, the draft with those other components that you can take a look, and we'll use the next meeting to address any changes. But I would say the week of the 28th of November, so after Thanksgiving.
After Thanksgiving. Is November 30th, the last Wednesday of the month, good for everybody? Okay.
Okay.
Let's set up that for our goal. We'll set it 11:30, 6:30 p.m. Good?
Yeah,
Okay. I'll set the meeting up for that. And that'll give Ken a month, as long as you eat too much turkey, to so we can get the report going and mail it out. If you have, once he mails out, you're gonna mail out pre-drafts ahead of time?
Well, we'll share with you, yes, the draft ahead of time, which will be basically the completed draft.
Okay.
And prior to that too, as part of this next step is to share the initial three chapters of the plan with the state, just to ensure that we're
Okay.
meeting those requirements.
Okay.
But yes, we'll share with you.
Okay.
The goal will be to get that to you a week. It'll be prior to Thanksgiving. So taking,
Good. Okay.
your
So
things.
as Ken gets the stuff out to us, feel free to comment. Don't wait for the meeting. Reply back to Ken, but carbon copy all of us in so that we can all see what you said. And don't think you've got to ask permission from me or Ken or anybody else to comment. If you got a reasonable comment, put it in and email it back to them, and we can take it up when we have our meeting.
For sure. Yes, I urge you to, so we can take that meeting to, address any sort of important content. or concepts. I think using that meeting to identify important concepts. The grammar stuff, you know, I'm very happy to accept those as, you know, as necessary. Lori is the prime author on this, the primary author on this, but she will be part of that meeting.
Sounds good.
Great.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank-
Ken.
Thank you all, and we'll see you. Have a nice Thanksgiving, since I won't
Yep.
see.
Have a nice thing, a nice Halloween.
You
and
too.
Don't let the garbage get you.
Hope you feel better then, Ken.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.